Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a review for you of this little guy right here. This is the Grimsmo Knives Rask. So Grimsmo Knives is a pair of brothers, John and Eric, up in Canada, a couple hours away from me actually, and they do really incredible work. For a long time I've had the Grimsmo Knives Norseman, which is probably my favorite pocket knife. Beautiful, beautiful knife. And this is the sequel to it, and I did a pre-order and it finally came in about a month or two ago. I took a little while to get the review ready here, just making sure I wasn't going to be too biased to, I don't know, wasn't going to let my expectations cloud my review, either on the positive or the negative side. So there you go. Also worth noting that the Grimsmo Knives folks have a YouTube channel, so check that out as well. You can see how they're actually making these guys using fancy CNC stuff. So there you go. Let's do some size comparison. First off, next to the Norseman, the Rask is smaller. Not by a huge margin, but it is definitely smaller. Next to another of my very favorite knives, the Spyderco/Bowie here, we can see here that handle-wise, the Rask is about the same, but blade length, a little longer. Swap this out for the Spyderco PM2 here, the Spyderco Delica, as always. So again, this is actually not a small knife, although it kind of looks it in some of the pictures. Right here is your ZT452CF, your Ontario Rat number 2. So, not a small knife, as I keep coming back to. Ontario Rat number 1, and, you know what the heck, Chris Reeve Knives, large Shabazz 21 in the Insingo blade. So there you go, that's the size of this little guy. So let's go ahead and finally jump into the good, the great, the bad, and the ugly of the Grimsmo Knives Rask. So on the good side, first off, I love the fact that you get a glimpse into the production of this knife via YouTube. Very few makers do this. Things tend to be kind of a black box, but it really gives you an increased appreciation for the knife and for the amount of work that goes into it. Seeing how much trouble they went through to make these little tiny screws, to machine these parts here, you know, hearing about the trials and tribulations. Even as somebody who is not a knife maker or not a machinist, it's really fascinating to see, and it's made me appreciate this knife even more than I already did. So that's nice. Next thing, it comes in a beautiful little presentation box. It's a little Pelican-style case, but the knife came to me shipped like this. And that's beautiful, not only because it gives you a very nice little unboxing experience, and because it's a great way to store the knife, but it also comes with a T9 tool for disassembly, as well as a container of the nano oil, which is a great lubrication that you can use with this knife here. So not only are they saying you can take the knife apart, but they're giving you the tools to do so, and to keep it running beautifully. That is a wonderful attitude that I just deeply love. So that's great. Next thing, the blade on this guy is nice. It is relatively thin behind the edge, which I appreciate. This knife can actually cut things, which is beautiful. The steel on it is fine. It's not the most exotic steel in the world, and especially for the price point, that's a little off. But you know what? It's a fine steel. RWL34 is A-okay. And then finally, the finish on this blade is very nice. You can see it's got a sort of mirror finish to it. I mean, here, yeah, you can see there's a guy back here. Hey, face reveal, enjoy. But there you go. So that's nice. I like the finish on this blade very much, and I also like the smoothness. At some level, I miss the steppy pattern of the Norseman here, but at another level, it's nice to see him try something different, and that's a heck of a finish. Beautiful. Next thing about this knife is the weight on it, because this is absurdly lightweight. Get my little scale out here. We're coming in at 3.18 ounces for a knife that's 3.5 inches long. That's really impressive, and it beats out, for instance, the Shabazz is in a similar size class here, and it's 4.5 ounces. I mean, this is a very lightweight knife, and you love that in the pocket. That's because of the copious amounts of internal milling in there, which I'll try and show off here, but probably won't do a great job. This knife, more so than most, I think you really should watch my disassembly video of, because you'll see the inside of the knife in just beautiful detail, and you'll see all the fun little touches they've added in there. So that's nice. The other result of that is that this is a very carryable knife. The way that the clip is done, the overall small, thin profile, the fact that the pocket, the flipper tab isn't much of a pocket pecker, it's not too big. You know, this whole thing just feels great in the pocket, and add in the fact that it's very thin. This knife is only slightly thicker, if not, it may not even be any thicker than your Spyderco Delica, which is a very thin knife and great in the pocket as well. So I love very much the thinness of this knife. Next thing I like very much are the ergonomics here. The Yogos are great. It feels very nice in my hand. You kind of lock in here. You've got good access to the lock bar here. It feels like a great knife in the hand. There's a little bit of a hollow spot in the back here, and it may vary from hand to hand. You can also choke up, by the way, if you need to, by going up onto this surface, which has been rounded to that effect. So, nice. Yogos are very, very good. Next thing I like very much about this is the customization that they offered. When you did the pre-order, you could choose the color. You could choose the milling pattern, because you see this guy's got these horizontal stripes, well, diagonal, I suppose, but you could also do a sunburst or a checker pattern, whatever. That was nice. You could choose different blade steel. For instance, you could go to a Damasteel Damascus-style blade, which is nice. You could even get Damascus scales, which is a very expensive form of titanium that looks really pretty. Basically, in the pre-order process, you could customize the knife you want, anywhere from completely full dress over the top to something that's pretty low-key. And I appreciate that very, very much. In my case, I chose to have it actually match my Norseman as best they could with same color backspaces and everything, and they did a pretty good job doing that, too. So that's nice, but it's nice to be able to customize a knife without it being a full custom in the classical sense of that. That's good. There are also lots of really nice details here. For instance, you get a lock bar stabilizer. Little hinder of stabilizers hiding inside there. You can't really tell, but it's in there and doing its job. That's nice. The pivot here is not free spinning, even though it's not tooled on this side. There is a little shelf in there. I don't know how robust that little shelf is going to be in the long term, but it works fine now. So that's nice. The knife itself is numbered. This one's 82. And it's also dated. If you look on the inside here, you'll see it gives the time and date of manufacturing. It's a beautiful thing. And speaking of which, there's all kinds of other engraving on the inside there, all kinds of internal milling, and, you know, nice little bits of jimping here on the flipper tabs. You don't come flying off the flipper, but it's not too sharp. That's nice. They've just done such good machining on this guy. Even the internal milling is beautifully finished with a nice little checkerboard pattern. It is just spectacularly well machined overall, and even look at the handle. There's zero chatter. It looks freaking great. And so I love the machining on this, and all of those little details they have gotten very right. I mean, heck, even look at the screws have extra details on them. Those little dots around the Torx heads. Beautiful, beautiful thing. So there you go. In light of all of those details and all of this work, I really don't have much of a problem with the price. This is a boutique knife. This is a luxury item. This is an expensive knife. $675 is the price of this knife. That is a crazy amount of money to spend on a knife. But the thing is, it is actually pretty clear to me why this knife was $675. They have spent a lot of time and effort machining and getting the code right to be able to machine this reliably. The finishing is great. With a couple of small exceptions we'll talk about later, this knife is really, really incredible. And frankly, this feels way more like it's worth $700 than a lot of other knives out there going for $700. Put this up next to a Shirogorov Neon, for instance. The Neon really comes out looking kind of pale in comparison with what's gone on here, and they're going for the same price in the States. So I don't really have a problem with the price, even though the price is completely insane. If you're willing to spend that money, this is a pretty good way to spend that money. And then finally, on the good side, the action on this knife is just incredible. This knife runs on Grimsmo bearings, 2 of them, as a matter of fact, the action is really great. It's got a great detent on here. It fires very, very nicely and reliably. You will never not make this knife flip. And that detent is just great. I mean, it's better than Shirogorov Neon, for instance, and it's way better than like 99% of knives out there. A couple of exceptions are the Grimsmo Norseman here, which has a slightly better detent. Peter Rosenti custom Thorburn as a Thorburn A2. Slightly better detent, but not by a whole lot. And then you couple that with this incredible drop shot fall action. Oh my God, is this beautiful. And so this is just an incredible action. I love the action on this knife just deeply. And functionally speaking, it is just as nice as the Norseman was, even though it's got a lighter blade. And so that's something I love. And so that on the whole is the good here. Great action. The price, no problems there. A lot of really great details, some good customization options. The ergonomics are good. It's really lightweight, so it's easy to carry. Blade is really nice. They include the tool and the lubrication in a beautiful presentation box, and you get to watch the whole thing be made on the YouTube. Beautiful, beautiful thing. Let's talk about what's actually great here, though. To me, what's great about this knife, or at least what's unique, I could go the action. The action is great here too, but what I settled on eventually is the fact that this knife is made entirely in-house. In the watch world, the world of high horology, you get a lot of prestige from making the innards of a watch entirely in-house, meaning you're not bringing parts in from other people, you're constructing the movement yourself, you're doing all the engineering at home, rather than leaning on somebody else. And this knife follows in that tradition. It is entirely in-house. Everything but the metals and the little balls that go into the ceramic bearing are made right there in their shop at someplace up in Canada there. They do the heat treat in-house. They do the cutting out in-house. Speaking of the heat treat, I haven't yet done enough shopping to evaluate it fully, but I am going to follow up in this in a later video, so keep that in mind. But they make the screws in-house. I mean, these are specialty screws. The pivot is quite obviously made in-house. Even the bearing cages are made in-house, so the bearings in this knife are unique to Grimsmo knives, and by God, do they work like a charm. So I love the fact that they are crazy enough to, rather than just buying a pivot or a screw or a bearing from Alpha Knife Supply or somebody else, that they just decided, you know what, we're going to do it here. Is there a functional difference? No. But there is kind of a neat little, okay, you're crazy, I respect that sort of thing there. So that to me is what's great about this knife, and frankly about the Norseman, is that these are entirely in-house knives. So, beautiful thing. Let's talk about what's bad. On the bad side, first off, I don't like the fact that they did a full price pre-order, which meant that the moment you pre-ordered this knife, they dinged your card for the full amount of your purchase. That's kind of, I don't know. There's a lot of trust involved there, because basically you just issued a loan to the Bank of Grimsmo for, however long until you get your knife. I went for this risk-wise because I knew that they could basically print money by making new Norsemen. If they were ever running low on liquidity, they crank one of these guys out and they're going to be okay for a little while. But still, that's a really dangerous game I played, and it could have just as easily resulted in me being out $600. If costs went up higher than they could pull in money, they close down and no one gets paid. And seeing them buy an expensive equipment off of that, I don't know. I mean, okay, I guess, but still. Get your loans from the bank, not your buyers. But whatever. And to be fair, I have no problem with deposits and things like that, but that was a little sketchy. Speaking of sketchy, the huge wait was also a bit of a problem, because early supporters got an opportunity to fund this knife a year and a half before their knives actually arrived. I know that they did a lot of growing and moving as a company in that time. They got a new lathe, a new mill, moved into a new warehouse, a whole bunch of things. I mean, and so at some level, it's nice they had that opportunity, but still, that's a lot of time. And if Visa loaned me $700 for a year and a half and I didn't do a damn thing about it, they would own my freaking soul by this point. So that's a little much. And then it's actually still kind of hard to get these guys. They're still finishing up the pre-orders for these. I suspect they'll be coming out more available coming up here soon. If they're smart, they'll get them all done by Blade Show so they can have a bunch on the table for sale. But still, I don't love the fact that these are a little hard to get still. I'm sure it'll get there, though. More about the knife. The knife does, to me, feel a little bit too big. When I got this guy, when I pre-ordered this, I had hoped that it would be a little bit smaller, maybe closer to Shirogorov Neon territory. Because then, this is a really nice design for a small EDC folder, but right now, this is sort of trapped in that range between being a nice compact folder and being a relatively huge art knife. I don't quite know that it knows where it's supposed to be. So I'd kind of like to see this shrunk down just a little tiny bit. But more so, my bigger problem with the design, actually I'll leave this here, is that the design is, well, it's nice, it's functional, it's fine, but the thing is, it's a little bit safe, and it's kind of borderline kind of boring. The Norseman, like it or not, was really, really weird in the very best of ways. I happen to really like this design, being as weird as it is, but there's nothing else like it out there. But the Rask is a little bit more vanilla, not in terms of the build or the construction, but in terms of the design. It's exceptional if you look at the details, but, at arm's length, it's kind of right in the middle of the road, and it's not so far afield from the kinds of designs you see from other custom makers out there in the world. It's a flip of frame lock made in 2016. That's much is pretty obvious. And so going from something that was completely out there to something that was a little bit more vanilla, I don't know, a little off to me, and that's one of the only weaknesses that I feel like this knife really has. Is it's not all that striking. It's not all that like whoa in the same way that the Norseman is. That's entirely a question of taste, and it's a fine design functionally speaking. But I'd like to see a little bit more art, so to speak, in the next one because these are kind of out of control knives. So design that's a little out of control would be kind of fun too. So to me at least, that's what's bad here. The design is pretty safe. The knife is, frankly, a little bit bigger than I think it should have been. They are still hard to get. There was a huge wait for supporters, and there was a full-price pre-order, which could have gone really wrong really quickly. So, there you go. Let's talk about the ugly, because sadly, there is a little ugly here. So on the ugly side, first there are two small build quality issues. First one is actually a little bit of lock stick. When you disengage the lock here, listen to this. There is some stick there. And in fact, it looks like the carbidizing on the lock bar might not have been done all the way across the end of it or something along those lines. It's not a huge deal, and I'm sure this is going to go away over time, and even as it is, I don't mind it particularly, but it is still something that's not quite where I'd want it to be. And then the other issue that's a bigger issue to my mind is this little area right down here. You can see, I hope, that right here, this little region is not sharpened at all. In fact, the sharpening begins right about where my thumbnail is here. Everything else is relatively dull. This knife badly needs a sharpening choil or to dip this down a little bit more and become a finger choil. And the thing is, they know this. I mentioned this to John Grimsmo in an email, and he said, yeah, a sharpening choil would definitely make Eric's life easier. He's the one who does all the sharpening. It's just not designed for that at this time. And, so I would have at least liked to have seen them come a little bit closer to the edge there during the sharpening, and I'll try and do that when I'm doing it on my own. But still, I feel like this needs a sharpening choil in a very real way. At some level, it helps to make this easier as a finger choil because you don't want this area to be super sharp if you're doing that, but still. That just seems like a really notable omission in a knife that's otherwise perfect to have this area of just unsharpened down there at the bottom. Not a big deal. And actually, frankly, these issues would not be ugly on any other knife. But, to be melodramatic, these two issues feel like you're collapsing 3 steps from the finish line in an ultra-marathon. When a knife is this close to being technically perfect, you hate to watch it stumble on little tiny details like lock stick or the sharpening issue here. And it's kind of telling that both of those areas of trouble are areas that are not done by a CNC machine, which is really their biggest strength. I know that they're rushing to get these guys out the door to fill these pre-orders because of that long wait that I was talking about, and I respect that they are, but you can't lose focus when you're chasing perfection, and I feel like those little areas are losses of focus. Not the end of the world, but they are kind of ugly in this greater context of a $700 knife. The last bit of ugly here isn't on John or Eric or the Grimsmos, but it's the fact that Grimsmo knives are in the middle of this huge bubble in the secondary market. If you look at the Rasks, you're seeing them going for like $1,100, and the Norsemen are going anywhere from $1,200 to thousands for a Damasteel version. That is huge, and that is painful, and frankly, it's stupid. The hype on these knives is absolutely absurd right now. The knives deserve some hype, absolutely, but not that kind of thing. Because the fact is that Rask pre-orders are going to finish in a couple of months. If they keep on their current production thing, that's going to be fine. And then every single Rask and Norseman that they make is going to start hitting the market at the retail prices, which are like $675, maybe $700. Someplace in that range. And I think retail for a Damasteel is like $8, $9, someplace in there. But either way, every single knife they make is going to hit the market directly at retail, and so it's going to make it possible for people to get these knives at reasonable prices. And then at a certain point, as economics dictates, the market's going to kind of hit saturation. The folks who want a Norseman really badly, or a Rask really badly, will get one. Supply's going to meet demand, and then suddenly these prices are just going to come slamming back down into the earth. And so right now, you have got to be on crack to pay big bucks for a Norseman or a Rask, rather than waiting a few months for them to get more of these out the door after this pre-order ends that's been constraining supply. So no matter how tempting it is after this review or any other to pay off some scalper and pay one, get $1,300 Norseman, just think how much it's going to sting to see him selling it, retail or sub-retail in like 6 months. So that's the other really, really ugly thing here that is completely unrelated to this knife, but the market in general is just absurdly, stupidly bubbly around these these knives right now. So there you go. That's the ugly, is there's this huge bubble in the market that's going to burst and leave a lot of people hurting. And then it had those two build quality issues, the lock stick and the sharpening here, that really was a little tough to handle when the knife is this damn close to perfect. So let's talk final conclusions here. So, final conclusions. My biggest worry about the Rask, actually, was that it would fail to live up to the reputation of its older sibling here. That they would just release something underwhelming after this guy, that the Norseman was a fluke. But I don't think that's the case. The Rask is absolutely a worthy successor to the Norseman on a technical and frankly just a knife-making level. The action is just as good, the construction is by and large just as good, and the details are absolutely 100% there. You can still tell that they deeply give a damn. And we can now see, with a sample size of 2, that the Grimsmos are really still exceptional knife makers. I would order sight unseen their next knife, and I will not say that for many knife makers. And if that next knife happens to be that 3-inch integral they're talking about, hint, hint there, John and Eric, holy crap do I want that. So basically, if you're watching there, John and Eric, take my money. Let me know about that. The bigger question that a lot of people have been asking me in the run-up to this review is, well, okay, these knives are going to stop becoming available here soon. Should I be going for a Norseman or for a Rask? And, this one actually caught me off guard, because I thought for sure the Rask was going to win this for me. Because you get a Norseman quality action in a smaller, more carryable package. That sounds just like what I would want. But oddly enough, I still like the Norseman more. The Norseman is a knife that is completely unlike anything else in my collection. Frankly, it's unlike anything else probably in your collection either. It's its own unique little snowflake of weird knife-making joy. But the Rask is kind of what happens when the Grimsmos use their methods, use their crazy CNC approach on a more middle-of-the-road sort of design. It is an absolutely excellent execution of this knife when you're looking closely using it, but on the surface, it's just not that, oh my god, blows you away. And so if you're a knife guy, if you are a knife collector, and you want something Grimsmo for your collection, frankly, the Rask is a wonderful knife, but the Norseman is going to feel more interesting. It's going to be more unique. It's going to be more, whoa, I think. But if you are after a high-end piece from a more practical everyday carry, or you need to be under 3.5 inches, the Rask is probably a better choice. I mean, there is a reason that more knives look like the Rask than like the Norseman. It's kind of a stealth Grimsmo in a lot of ways. It's got all the excellence, by and large, just in a less over-the-top package. So, I think I do prefer the Norseman a little bit, but the Rask is definitely getting pocket time too, so they grow both great knives. But in conclusion, like I said, this is absolutely one hell of a pocket knife. It's not as novel as the Norseman, and there are a few places where the Rask needs some tweaks to hit the perfection. But it is a really solid design for EDC. It is done beautifully with an incredible action and just stellar machining. And as such, it is absolutely a gem. And it is absolutely staying around in my collection. So if you can get one around the retail price, either now or once the bottom drops out in a few months, you should absolutely do it. I think it is 100% worth the Rask. Okay, anyways, hope this has been interesting to you, and have yourselves an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Bye now.